Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of this fireside chat with us. Our topic today is enterprise realities of AI-driven fraud. My name is Harjot. I work with Talview as the Director of Customer Success. I'm excited to host Kala as our panel today. Kala comes with 2 decades of experience in the talent acquisition space, leading organizations like TCS in their hiring practices, currently as her role as the head of talent acquisition for the APAC region. She's tasked with strengthening the future readiness of TCS from the organization standpoint. Kalap, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Perfect. Getting into the topic for today. So, our topic today is something which I think everybody would have experienced at some point, or the other, right? Where uh, AI is something which is here to stay, and remote hiring as well is become the norm, right? Now, along with that, what happens is interview fraud is rising as a trend, and so much so where it's not only proving to be a hindrance, but it's now actually become a bit of a business risk for organizations as they move along as well, right? So what we are trying to understand today from the fireside chat with Kala is how are organizations kind of tackling the interview fraud and kind of building their practices while they continue to strengthen their hiring practices and scale, but also tackling one of these larger problems that's kind of coming up in the world today. And we'll kind of quickly delve into some of the topics and gauge on Kala's experience from working in such large organizations and driving such large practices to get
Great. Sure. Sure,
perfect.
Arjun.
So quickly getting started, Kala, I think so. In our conversations, we've obviously seen, but this is not something which is new. I think it's a problem which has been there for some time. So, in the last 12 to 18 months, as a talent acquisition leader, what are some of the changes that you've observed in the nature of interview fraud and impersonation that's coming up? I know candidates are becoming smarter and smarter day by day, and we're trying our best to catch up with them. But any such instances, and what's the development that you've seen in the space particularly?
Sure. Once again, thank you, Harjot. And few things before we start with the answer from my side for the question, for the very important question which you have asked. So the views which are going to be expressed by me are going to be personal in nature, which is more to do with my experience and interaction with industry colleagues who are facing this common issue of securing the right candidate. That has been the most important thing right now for all of us to look at. That's first point which I wanted to start with. And second important thing, definitely, I knew about the topic which we are going to discuss today. So I have actually made notes, and I'm sitting here with all of you to share that what it could be all about, and how. So as I said, that whatever we are facing today, and specifically with respect to the question which you asked just now, that 12 to 18 months in this duration, what you have seen, I would say that let me take a step back and go to the COVID times. It all started more so to start like it was always there. Trust me, you ask any of the hiring manager today, it is not new. The processes picked up by the fraudulent for the fraudulent activities by certain candidates is what is different, I would say. But the process of we as hiring managers coming across such instances may not be very new, but definitely, as you said, that with the agentic AI, with the traditional AI, and now with agentic AI, things are changing for sure. That's there. Now coming to the time period from COVID, and within last 12 to 18 months, whatever we are seeing, it has moved beyond the point wherein we are talking about a proxy candidate sitting, or anybody who virtual interviews. Basically, let me start with where it all started from a frequency standpoint. The virtual interviews is where I would say that it all started. And when we are talking about virtual interviews, proxy was a well-known fear which each one of us had, as hiring managers, that this will be there, wherein are we talking to the actual right person, and what is happening. At the same time, what I have seen and what I have heard from my industry colleagues, my friends, is that uh, we are talking about the candidates when we are taking interview, when we are getting our panels to interview these candidates. Uh, things have changed, as you rightly said, with AI getting evolved, with the agentic AI coming into picture. We are talking about more enhanced tools which are now in picture, and we are not trying to get a candidate. We are trying to get the right candidate among the fair and fraudulent candidates. You're getting it right. So
Got it. Yeah.
we do have candidates, but we have to get the right candidates, wherein we may be ending up rejecting a good candidate who doesn't meet our requirement completely. At the same time, it may also have a block of candidates who are really not up to the mark and using any malpractice. So it's very complicated. It's not as easy as said, but yes, we are trying. So this is the major change which I believe we are facing right now.
Got it. And I think rightly called out, Kala, where it's not just probably in the last 12 to 18 months, it goes well beyond, in COVID, where we kind of all shifted our practices because of the need of the hour. And like you said,
Absolutely.
well knowing the risks, but now it's become a bit of how do we kind of play up with it? And it's become something that we kind of need to go ahead and kind of tackle along as we go along, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect, perfect. Now, can I just quickly going ahead? So, from a generative AI influence, and you spoke a lot about, the agentic AI, generative AI kind of tools, right? To commit fraud, and how has the approach shifted, from your team standpoint to kind of approaching interviews with all of the advents of so many tools? I mean, um, I know as organization, when we listen to some of the experiences given by yourself, hiring managers, we talk about tool A, and then quickly in that same conversation there is B, C, D, E, F, G, H, all up until Z is mentioned, right? So with so many things coming up in the market, so how is the approach shifted, from your team standpoint in evaluating these candidates?
Okay. Coming to the evaluation, this is very interesting. I would say that for hiring managers, it is not about the interview process. I know the topic here is interview security and all of that, but trust me, it goes a step back. We are talking about starting from the job posting which we do, and getting the resumes against those job postings, or any kind of advertisement which we would have posted on either on our own careers portal or on LinkedIn or any other platform, and trying to get suitable resumes. Our problem starts there and then, wherein we see the influx of resumes on higher side, and we know for a fact two interesting aspects, more from an anecdotal point I would just mention here. One, we get the number of resumes, the number of profiles against a job posting has increased specifically for niche roles. And second, we have also seen, I would add, and when I say we, I'm talking from all my hiring managers colleague across industry, the same candidate sending resume for two different roles, which may happen, two or more, I would say, wherein the resume would have changed, tweaked. That also happens. It's like, I'm not generalizing it, for, as I said again at the very beginning of the very first question, I still believe majority of the candidates are honest. This is what I would like to believe as the hiring manager, and this is what I would definitely stand by. But those few who are in the market, and that's where our vigilance goes extra mile in detecting those fraudulent or malpractice or any such behavior which we need to stop, and that's where the interview security comes. But with respect to the interview security, a step back in terms of the profiles which we receive, that is at a stage when we are not even meeting the candidate, or we don't even know who the candidate is, it gets even more important for us to look at the profiles which we are going to screen to invite those shortlisted candidates for the interview virtual. So that is where the game begins, and that's where the recruiters have to put in a lot of effort to understand that what is happening, what exactly is happening. And we have our smart recruiters all over the place, who are able to detect to an extent, because it's a manual intervention what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, when you have to shortlist those final 10, you may have a resume screener, you may have a tool which screens your resume, which may show you the best fit. You pick up those 10 best fit. Still, as a recruiter, you may have your doubts that, am I calling the right candidate? Then you call the candidate for a video interview. And that's where we need to see that, that's what I keep telling my team at times: no need to get excited if you're getting too many resumes, for a given role, given position. We need to look at the best fit post interview, that who are our final selects. That's where the major role of us as hiring manager comes into picture. And coming to the point where you were asking about, I believe I'm just referring to my note where when I'm talking about various tools. This is what input I have gathered from my team, from our, my, as I said, my colleagues from across industry, wherein the talk about, these advanced tools which come into picture, right? We are talking about live prompting, the AI assistance which is coming into picture, and live responses. Everybody now talks about chat gpt or a co-pilot or whatever. And then we are talking about, candidates using those platforms to get through the system, get through the interview process. So how, these are the various, so this is where it comes to us as as the hiring team, to be very vigilant. So things are changing, as you rightly said at the beginning of the call, that the entire process of interview security is getting tightened because the methods are changing. The way things are happening, we all need to be very, very vigilant. So definitely that kind of I would say that we are keeping our teams informed. We are keeping our teams, they are more informed us. I'm telling you, because when they work on the ground, when they are the ones who are interacting with the candidates, they know what they are doing. So yes, I'll
Perfect.
further elaborate on this. Yeah.
No, perfect, Kala. I think a very valid point brought up. It just doesn't begin at the interview stage. It kind of begins way beyond when you're kind of posting the job and getting resumes. I know in my conversations, with most of the teams, everybody's saying that every resume looks near perfect, where a resume screening is giving, high scores for everything because everybody's using these generative AI tools to build their own resume. And like you said,
Yes.
right, just making minor tweaks to ensure that it neatly aligns with the JD. So all the keywords are there, all the matches are there, so that everybody looks like the best and perfect candidate. And I can imagine for
True.
your teams, getting the volume and then getting such resumes just makes it even more difficult to even get to that right candidate. And then when
True.
you combine it with all the LLM GPTs that are being used today, I mean, every single day probably we see a video either on YouTube, or the olden days it was how to crack kind of videos which were being put. But I mean, today YouTube, Instagram is filled with videos of all of the kind of ways to cheat, right? And even if you don't want to kind of follow it, there's just a kind of view that, okay, let me also try it and see, which maybe even draw some candidates towards kind of doing these practices, right? So I get the problem. And definitely, hats off to all the recruiters who are still kind of pulling in the profiles, giving it to hiring managers, and kind of doing their best to get the process kind of continued.
Sure.
So from a organization standpoint, Kalan, generally from your industrial standpoint, right? What are some of the processes and enhancements and safeguards that you've introduced, to help your hiring teams stay ahead? Because, like you said, right, it's just sometimes overwhelming. But we as leaders and organizations need to also help, our recruiters, our hiring managers with certain enhancements and safeguards to deal with this problem. So, if you can just shed some light on that, that'll be great, I think.
Sure. So before we get into the aspect of that, what measures as industry leaders every enterprise is taking today, I would rather first highlight that the security, reputational, the compliance risk associated with this is very, very high. You know,
Mhm.
so when we are talking about the overall, it's more like a, needless to say, it's a cyber risk what we are talking about. It's as simple as that from a terminology point of view. But then yes, there's a lot which goes behind this. So how do we tackle this? Definitely there are multiple level of steps which gets involved, starting like risk identification. Definitely we know that we are trying to get somebody into the system, so are we getting the right people into the system? That's a bigger risk than anything else that we have all have to face as industry. That is one. And then do we have the right detection tools in place, to look at this, to mitigate this risk? That is what majorly, in simple layman term, this is what we are trying to do. But how we are going planning, or how do we do about it, how do we go about it, is something which we need to look at. And definitely, as I understand, each one of us from the industry standpoint is looking at various tools. As I said, we are looking at applications, tools which will detect such behavior. And we are talking about not only a tool which will look at only what answers the candidate is. We're not, no, we are not talking about that. We are talking about any kind of multi-layer verification, authentication which can happen with respect to a candidate behavior, and as well as training our teams, because we are not talking about hiring. When I say about hiring teams, it's not like a recruiter who would be selecting or rejecting a candidate. We are talking about the entire ecosystem of the organization coming together, for a particular requirement, from the hiring manager. When we say hiring manager, it is somebody from the project, from the business side, who will be coming, set of people who will be coming forward to take this interview, and then looking at whether to select or reject a candidate. And one thing which I keep hearing from my friends is that we can't expect our panels to be doing the policing all the time, looking at whether they would like to see, or whether the candidate is the right candidate, or is there anything else involved here. Is it the candidate who's doing the conversation with me right now, or is it some agentic AI talking behind the scenes and prompting for the candidate? So these are the various worries which we keep hearing, from all angles. And that's where I'm saying that the right training to our people, while we do not expect any policing to be done by our own people directly on, during the course of an interview or whatever, but then yes, they need to pick up the flags, that if there is anything coming up, and supported by the right tools, but that's what I call it, as in a counter agentic AI tools, if at all we have. And in terms of traditional AI, which will only look at the answers, maybe, like, if I have to look at what we are used to doing, is that we used to look at the answers given by the candidate, whether it is the right answer or no, or whether it has been picked up through some AI tool. Simplest being that whether the candidate is trying to type it somewhere and trying to get an answer. Today we are looking at more than that. We are looking at prompters, we are looking at transcripts, we are looking at a proxy, in terms of a machine being the proxy there, not the individual. So
Mhm.
various such forms, so that is where we need to be vigilant from our side as well. And then of course the governance mechanism, in terms of whatever we are implementing, is it in the right form and picture, in terms of, are we allowed, are we, can we do that? So various other governance aspects, which definitely the tools also help us in terms of, simplest form is that, when we start with the interview, a tool may be taking a consent from the candidate that this video is going to be recorded, and this is one of the simplest form of informing the candidate also, that that you are being viewed, so please let us know your consent. That is the simplest way wherein we are looking at getting things starting to be vigilant from both sides, that, yeah, be aware, that way. So
Got
yes,
it.
and definitely all these steps should be in a form which is being monitored, audited, and doing it the right way, I would put it that way, simply. Yeah.
Perfect. And I think very valid, Kala, when you talk about a couple of important aspects there, like in terms of training, your folks, and in terms of ensuring that while we are doing things to counter it, it's all being done with measures and governance in place, so that we are giving the right set of experience and the right set of safeguards in place for both, not only the hiring manager and the organization, but also the candidate, right? In letting them know that they're being monitored, their activities are recorded, so that it's not an unknown for them. And I think that's very important, from an organization risk mitigation standpoint as well, right, when you come to such topics.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, no, I think from an enterprise standpoint, and your organization is an enterprise and probably one of the largest hiring organizations globally, right? So how do you kind of train your equip your TA teams to identify some of these red flags, during remote sessions? I know that there are, a lot of trainings that are happening in place. So could you just shed some light around how do you equip your TA teams, Kala?
Okay. Again, speaking for the industry, I would say that it is not about bringing in those red flags right in the middle of the interview. That never happens. Practically, it never happens. At least I can speak for myself as well as for my other industry colleague friends with whom I interact. We do not interrupt an interview abruptly just like that, because we are not sure. The red flag can be there, but we are not sure. The interview may continue, and at the end of the interview, if there are any red flags which has been observed by the panel or by the respective tools, that is when we will take a call internally as what to do about it, what to do about that fact which has been highlighted. More so than anything else, I would like to tell this confidently, that we also try to give, if we are not very sure about any aspect which would have been observed as a red flag, but we are not confident, we have and we will go to the extent of giving a second chance to the candidate. Because for us, I'm telling you, candidate experience is of utmost importance. At the end of this, whether how technology is evolving and how the processes are evolving, at the end of the day, that candidate experience is something which is very, very important. It is not about to get, we are not a detective agency here, let me put it this way. We are not. And for us, every candidate is important. It is very difficult at times to pinpoint anybody that, are you involved in any malpractice right now. It doesn't happen that way practically.
Mhm.
So we would, so, and one more important thing which I can speak for my team as well as for from an industry standpoint here, is that the people who are involved in the process, in the talent acquisition process, and the panels, specifically the panels who are coming and taking interviews, all of them have a fair idea that I would say this is human detective. People who are involved, they do have an idea at the end of the day. When the candidates speak, they will know that what is happening, and they can see if something is really a red flag for them. And as I said, we do observe those qualities at the end of the interview. And as I said, we do believe in giving second chances, even third, fourth chances if required, to see that the candidate gets a fair chance.
Got it. And I think you started off the discussion itself by saying, right, I think it's a few candidates, in the market who are kind of indulging in this, and, valid point in terms of not generalizing the pool. So,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
it goes a long way in terms of doing that, right? And you're right, you can never 100% be sure that something's happening unless it's that obvious, right? So you
Yes.
always need to kind of rely on the side of giving benefit of the doubt to the candidate, doing a post audit, post review to see whether, what your hunch was, whether that's
Absolutely.
true or not. So I think hats off in terms of being able to manage that fine balance, right, between kind of catching the right set of candidates, and as well ensuring that the candidate experience is maintained. Because, and that kind of goes into, some of the next questions that, I wanted to get into, right? It's always a fine balance. How do you kind of balance that security layer by maintaining, a smooth process while still ensuring that your candidate experience is paramount? I think when I talk to every TA leader, they come back saying that it is still that, we look at every candidate as being a potential candidate, and, we don't want to miss out on even one candidate potentially being the right one, right? So how do you, as kind of TA leaders and organizations, play that fine balance? I know you mentioned, not immediately kind of stopping an interview, but doing a post review is one way of ensuring that the candidate's experience is maintained. Giving multiple chances are, also another way of being fair. But anything additional that you'd like to add on, Kala?
I believe every other enterprise, big or small, are trying to deploy some kind of a tool or an application in terms of looking into these aspects, because at the end of the day, time is also of the essence. It's very important. We can't be spending our entire time, just being in, trying to get, the right out of the wrong. That's very humanly impossible when you're running behind position fulfillment. That's what it is all about. Um, Having said that, this is where I would like to talk about platforms like Talview and other what like which we also do deploy to an extent. Plus, I'm also hearing about the enhancements which Talview is going to bring in. So this is where the support, while we do may have applications which are existing within the organization. So we are talking about, like, I was going through. In fact, as I said, I've come with my notes. So I was talking about, I was looking through the notes wherein Talview is trying to deploy their 7-layer security framework. And I believe all these 7 layers, which you have tried to explain in your, enhancements, is something in some form or the other, either through Talview or any of the platform, every organization might be looking at it. And one thing, while, one important aspect here is that while I speak for the industry, one thing is that whatever I have said so far is nothing new. This is something which probably every hiring manager, every hiring team knows about it. It is just collection of thoughts, probably, which I'm just putting it across to you in this conversation, which people may pick up and may think that yes, this is what is happening. So it's basically a collection of thoughts, a conversation to think through for all of us, that that yes, things are happening very rapidly in the market. And very importantly, if I have to to this question which you have asked, while the technology landscape is changing for the candidates, we are talking about everyday technology changing, with new, like, traditional AI is now set aside. We are talking about Gen AI, we are talking about agentic AIs. While all of these being is talked about, to pick up the right candidate, we ourselves have to become those gatekeepers here as hiring team, to ensure that the right candidate is going in. So what are those factors which we have to take into account? So when I talk about your 7-layer security framework, you are being talking about this AI identity verification, which prevents your proxies or deep fake impersonation and all of that. So definitely that is something which I believe in one form or the other every organization today is doing. Then you have talked about this AI environment monitoring, that is looking at any hidden people, hidden faces nearer to the candidate. And then assessment feed monitoring, very interesting, Harjot. I must comment on this, wherein you are talking about a platform wherein you are saying that your AI generated answers and any kind of suspicious navigation patterns of the candidates can be detected by your platform. So that again becomes a very, very important parameter to help the hiring teams. And then of course you're talking about the much talked about agentic web monitoring and research. You're talking about any content which the candidate is trying to speak about, which is already there. It's basically a content web crawling, or whatever way you people are trying to figure it out, that the content whatever is speaking is ditto to what the candidate is talking about. Just adding a piece here, that I know in India, a lot of universities who are actually using tools to detect the research papers submitted by the students, whether it is first copy or a plagiarized copy.
Okay.
So whether the true copy, whether it is coming from by the candidate, or what what is happening. So these are various things which definitely is going to help everybody. And then we are talking about intelligence layer, as you mentioned, which is talking about uncovering any collusion or any kind of identity fraud. And are there any repeat behaviors, especially when we are talking about facial recognition and all. We spoke about at the beginning of this call, whether the same candidate coming again and again, or something, for the same role has applied and trying to beat the system by coming again and again for the interviews. That also, I believe, this is something which we have been discussing for long, and this is what the platform is providing. That's a very intelligent move to detect one of the early detection of whether the candidate, at the beginning of the interview itself, the panel would know whether the candidate has applied before, or coming in for the second, third time, or whatever. Then we are talking about device security, wherein you are talking about any kind of virtual machines or any screen sharing and screen locking, which is not allowed. I believe this is again a very, very important. So these are all sounds to be very basic, but trust me, when actually we are on the go, when we are interviewing candidates, it's not that simple. It has to be detected, and it has to be monitored, and it has to be eliminated if these practices have been any kind of malpractice. That's what I keep saying, that any kind of malpractice, if the candidate has been indulged in, it's important to eliminate such factors, such patterns, and such individuals per se. And then the last one which I saw in your 7-layer security framework, you have talked about AI behavior monitoring, in terms of whether like, as I said, I have come here with my notes, so I was referring to my notes. It is permissible, because the way the agreement here is between the discussion which Harjot and Kala might be having, but this is something which may not be permissible in an interview setup. So
Right.
those kind of detections, whether is happening, is very, very important. So yes, so these are the various checks and balances which I believe each one of us as a hiring team are already prepared or getting enhanced, their tools, applications, platforms. So this is where we are.
No, Kala, I think appreciate you kind of sharing those views. And like you said, right, it's one thing to be aware, but it's the other thing to be prepared. So I think us trying our best to be prepared by putting, the best foot forward, is all that we're trying to do as, TA leaders and organizations supporting TA organizations. So uh, to kind of wind this discussion up, Kala, I think, looking ahead, from your standpoint, right, how, in addition to what you just spoke, is there anything else that TA leaders and TA teams need to kind of evolve around to be able to kind of prepare themselves, for what's coming? Right. Any other thoughts or closing comments you would have, for us?
So Harjit, what I would say is that we have to stay vigilant. That's one, and one more. It may sound simple but complicated. That as a candidate experience I spoke about. So when I talk about candidate experience, this is something I would like to leave a message with all the audience you may have for this chat. Is that candidate experience cannot be compromised at any stage. It's very, very important. Having said that, we need to get the right fit, and all the hiring teams are especially it's practically they are very, very held up with a lot of things. They need to close a position. That's what they are with. At the same time, that's what I'll go back to the message which I'd like to relay, that at the end of the day we need to be very, very aware of the from a security standpoint, from a reputational standpoint, and from a compliance standpoint, that we stay aware, vigilant, and ensure that in the larger ecosystem wherein, for your own organization, you're trying to bring in the right hire comes through the right path and the right way. So that's very, very important, and that's how we all will be successful in our respective roles. And given, as I said, hiring teams are all prepared. This is what I know for sure. Lot of effort goes behind in getting the right candidate into the system, and the efforts continue. But that's what I would say, that we need to be very, very aware of whom we are getting in at the end of the day. Yeah. Thank
No,
you.
I truly appreciate, and I can see the sense of passion, you as a leader and your organization has in terms of candidate experience. While we're doing everything we can, but we want to ensure that the candidate experience stays paramount. And I think that resonates with probably every hiring leader, right? Because they would have all started off, in the early years, kind of focusing on talking to candidates, conversing with candidates, kind of trying to get the right set of candidate for the right role. But as the pressure kind of, like you said, the hiring numbers, the pressures arise, we don't want to lose focus on probably the root levels, right, which is experience, while still trying to be fair to our organization and, fair to candidates.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true, and that's what we all hiring teams, will vouch for. At the end of the day.
Fantastic, Kala. I think, thank you for joining us, for this fireside chat, Kala. I think your insight and your knowledge will definitely help, everybody who's been a part of this session or would be listening to it, reading it at any point in time, right? Interview fraud definitely is here, right? And it's not just about how quickly it's evolving, but it's about how quickly we can evolve, we can innovate, we can be prepared, right? So it's something which is a shared responsibility at this point in time between teams and technologies. While hiring teams are doing their efforts, we as technology providers also need to kind of stay ahead of the game and kind of collaborate with you folks in terms of
Mm.
ensuring that the right awareness, the right systems are in place, to help enterprises as they scale to be able to tackle this. Right. I hope, today's conversation sparks a lot of new conversations, a lot of new ideas, into everybody's kind of thought process. And we kind of continue to grow to tackle some of these problems that are there and kind of still ensure that we're maintaining the right balance between candidate experience and getting the right candidate through the door. So truly appreciate everybody joining the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kala.